Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Rural Rapport. My name is Teresa Hoffman. I'm a Senior Communications Associate here at the Center for Rural Affairs. On this episode, my guest and I will be discussing the challenges facing independent meat processors in Nebraska and a new program to assist them. Earlier this year, the center announced the availability of $15 million in loan capital through its new Meat and Poultry Processing Loan Program, launched with the assistance of the USDA's Agriculture, Meat, and Poultry Intermediary Loan Program. The loans are designed to help both existing USDA-inspected processors and as well as existing processors and startups planning to become USDA-inspected. The loans can be used to expand a business, start a new business, real estate purchases, new construction, facilities updates or expansion, equipment purchases, energy efficiency upgrades to facilities and equipment, the purchasing of an existing business, or working capital. My guest today is Kevin Barnhill. He's the owner and operator of the Blair Meat Market. Thank you, Kevin, for joining me today.
Good morning.
Kevin, tell me about yourself. How'd you get started in the industry, and tell me a little bit about your facility there in Blair.
Sure. So I'm Kevin Barnhill. I was born and raised in Gainesville, Texas, and I got started in the industry as a child. My family owned meat markets along Highway 82. So I started cutting meat in the family business when I was about 8. I went to university at Arizona State and graduated with a degree in ag business and meat science. And from there, I just have had several positions throughout the industry, everything from a meat buyer for grocery chains, working for Topco Associates, to finished as a director of procurement for Conagra Foods, handling their imported meat business, and also working for Adams Land and Cattle Company as vice president of purchasing here in Nebraska. The plant that we're currently own and operate was idle about 9 years ago, and I saw a need in our community. That Washington County is still fairly rural, and there's quite a few livestock producers here. They're small scale, right? They're farmers and producing livestock, but there was no place here in Washington County to take them. And so I bought the plant. It was idle. I remodeled, rebuilt, restarted, and here we are now, running at capacity, and actually working more in value added and retail as much as we do the slaughter portion of our businesses.
Well, great. So this new initiative comes at a time when small lockers across the state have seen heightened demand, which for many started at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when work at regional packing plants paused or slowed. Share what it was like to go through that time, what challenges you were seeing, and maybe what you've heard from others at that time.
So it was a challenge for a lot of reasons. But it was a difficult time dealing with COVID. Things were moving so rapidly. It started with the large packers were losing people and capacity and just could not get things taken care of. So people started turning to the small guys. And then at the same time, the grocery stores, especially in our small community, there's 2, basically ran out of meats, right? Because of distribution, supply chain issues, because of packing house issues, they just couldn't get products. So we had become a USDA facility a few years before the pandemic. And so we were well poised, at least in our business, that we started buying our own cattle. And so we never ran out of meats. We never ran out of product. We were buying our own cattle and hogs. We're not a poultry plant. So we did struggle some with poultry, but we were just buying our own cattle and hogs, and basically went back to when I started cutting meat in the 70s, right? We were merchandising whole carcasses and not just boxed beef. And so once we got that figured out, suddenly everybody wanted to buy halves and quarters. So then we started buying cattle and selling halves and quarters, and people figured out that their grandparents maybe didn't have it quite so wrong, that having a quarter beef in your freezer is actually less expensive and a better value in the long run. It may be a little bit more cash up front, and inconvenient at times as you just can't go to the store. But long term, they found that it's a better product at a better value. And so what we've seen is those people have now become repeat customers. We didn't lose them back, right? They didn't go back to old habits. They adapted and stayed with the new habit. And so our business continues, and not just our business, but I would say our level in the industry continues to stay at capacity. And we could use some construction. I think that's where these loans come in. Unfortunately, it's a lost skill set. Guys were retiring out for a lot of years, and we saw a lot of shrinkage in this category of plant because nobody wanted to do the work. It is labor intensive work, and that still is a big struggle that even if you were to build a plant, I don't know if you could staff it appropriately. We struggle with staff questions still, and I think that's the new reality.
Yeah, that's probably a program, whole one of these programs in itself.
Yeah.
How do you think the industry is bouncing back? Do you think these small processors are kind of regaining their footing? What are you seeing out there today in regards to how the industry is doing today?
I do. So you've got the big guys. Then you've got a level that I've always referred to as small plants that are, call them 1,000, 1,500 head a day. And most people don't think that's a small plant, but in our industry, it is a small plant. But the very small plant, like what we operate in other, let's call it the locker level, where you're less than 100 a day kind of deal, it's still lacking. I don't see a lot of rebuild there. There is a lot of environmental issues that these small lockers are just not equipped to deal with, water being the big one, right? So most rural city water treatment plants aren't equipped to deal with the effluent. So then you've got to start talking about ponds and pre-treating. And when you get to a guy that's my size, that's 100 head a week or less, that's a different level of work that you're not equipped to hire a full-time QA guy. The owner is the QA and the HACCP guy, and so there's a lot of challenges to building these plants, not the least of which is finances. Small scale plants are now an $8 to $10 million project, and that's quite a long payback. And as mentioned a minute ago, the young guys that would be interested in doing that don't have the skill set to operate the business.
Right. That takes me kind of into the next question. While the pandemic added, more challenges, they were there long before then. Kind of
Yes.
Building on what you were talking back before, what are some of those challenges, and do they still exist today?
So I think it goes back to personnel, right? One of the reasons you saw a lot of small town lockers closing is the guys that had owned them forever, 30 plus years, might be second generation, maybe even third generation in that town, but they couldn't get anybody to fill the next generation or the next, this guy wanted to retire and nobody's willing to step in, either his kids, let's be honest, they're just like farm kids. It's a huge struggle across the agriculture in general, that getting kids to come back to the farm, right? We're in a time where that's just not an attractive lifestyle or an attractive way to make a living. It's hard. It's not always, you're not going to be wealthy. And so there were guys that nobody would buy the plant, nobody would buy the business. So they had no other option but to close, just retire and close and liquidate as best they could. And that's kind of what happened with the plant I bought, but yet I was passionate enough about it that I was willing to do it. And then let's say you do buy one of these businesses or start it. Again, it goes back to staffing. You've got to be both a trainer and a supervisor and a business owner and a business runner. And you got to be in your business in addition to running your business. And so there's a lot of hats that a guy has to wear. And I've been very blessed personally, and that I've got two guys that are coming up and are partners now in our business. And they're young and they're hungry and they're aggressive, and they've got a lot of great ideas to go to the next level without huge facility expansions, but making use of the facility and the infrastructure we currently have.
So for processors such as yourself who have the staffing in place and just kind of ready to move forward. How would this loan program help processors like yourself that have the staffing in place, but just kind of need that next kind of level of financing, I guess?
So I think one, I like that it's so when you go to commercial financing, they're not always a big believer in the risk involved in this industry, and it is a big risk industry. But yet through these kinds of rural loan programs that are directed to this industry, it makes available capital a little bit easier to get. And so for us, that would be instead of expanding our existing facility, it would be maybe buying a piece of adjoining real estate that then we could move into more further processing. Although we could use more shackle space as an industry in this category, more slaughter space, I really think a lot of the next level is just about further processing. So I would say over 30% of our current slaughter is for private label, not even going back to the farmer or the custom exempt, the quarters and halves, but it's private label, guys that are building internet businesses and farmers market businesses and niche products where they're marketing their own genetics. They also want to do more value add type products, whether it be sticks, jerky, sausages, other things to market their own inventory. And so that would be where we would spend this kind of capital, is expanding into that arena, not necessarily slaughter space.
Yeah. So this loan program we're talking about today is one of many kind of efforts launched since the pandemic.
Right.
Lawmakers in Nebraska and Iowa, for example, approved funding for grants, low interest loans. There's other state and federal programs across the country. While each program has its specific qualifications and goals, overall, what was it like to see that type of support from lawmakers and kind of the decision makers in our country?
So it was exciting, right? It's an industry that's been taken for granted and overlooked for a lot of years. I will say personally, I think the first efforts that the USDA did were kind of a miss. You saw a lot of the grants and loans going to, I know of at least 3 being constructed of these 1,500 head a day plants, right? And so the government felt like that, let's call it the big 3, were in a monopoly or that kind of position. And so instead of focusing on the really small guys, they focused on that next level down. And I think that was a miss. I think there was a lot of opportunity missed. One that really doesn't support local agriculture or local producers or small scale producers, livestock producers. It's still focused on the bigger feed yards, bigger cattle producers. And honestly, those plants eventually will be gobbled up by the big 3. I mean, that's just the way it works. They'll continue that consolidation. I've been there, done that, lived through that with a couple of plants that I helped put together at that level. So I'm more excited now at the second blush, where the lawmakers kind of figured out that, oh yeah, we didn't quite get it down as far into the weeds as we should have. And that's where we're at now. And I'm more encouraged by that.
Well, before we wrap things up today, this is kind of your opportunity. Tell me a little bit about the benefits of local independent meat processors such as yourself to the economy, the food supply, and also farmers in the area who want to sell their meat.
Well, and that's just it. It is a true local effort, right? And we employ, right? We employ in town, and we bring dollars into our town and not a plant on the periphery of the town. What we do is, and most small lockers like us, not only we're a locker, but we're also a retail store, right? So it is a real community effort, community store. It's not just a plant or a factory or a job, but we are active in the community. And so it keeps that dollar recycling within the community. And all the studies show that if you can recycle that dollar within your own community, it's almost exponential what it does as far as the support across the community. So I think, back in the day, when you go back when I started in the 70s, every small town had a locker, and it was called a locker because not everybody had a freezer. Not everybody had a deep freeze in the garage. And so you rented locker space. Well, we don't do that anymore, mostly because home freezers are inexpensive enough and everybody has one. but it's that same kind of mentality that they could call me and they could say, hey, I want this and this. And I know my customers and my customers know me. So there's a level of trust. And then when they get to know the farmers that we work with and produce with, and they say, hey, can I buy a quarter? And I direct them to our local farmers and our local producers. And so that you're developing these cross relationships where people truly know where their proteins are coming from. And there's a confidence in what those proteins represent and feeding their family in a healthy manner that they're not feeling at the national level. I mean, we see this constantly, that they just have a fundamental, some of it's earned, some of it's real, some of it's just internet noise, but there's a fundamental distrust for the factory farm. Now, the factory farm is an important part of our economy, and factory production of proteins is an important part of our national economy. But on a local level, folks just still like to know where their proteins come from.
And it's definitely a part of living in a rural area, and
Absolutely.
maybe the draw to some people as well. Well, thank you, Kevin, for joining me today to talk about this program. I've included a link in the comments section to the Center's meat processing loans page on our website, as well as contact information for Center staff who can assist you. Thank you for joining us today for the Rural Rapport. If you'd like to learn more about the center, visit our website at cfra.org. Have a good day.
Thank you.